Welcome to another episode of Into Final Thoughts. Before we jump into it, I want to tell you to check out our official partner of this season of Into Final Space, Cartoon Crave. Cartoon Crave is an incredible network and news source for all things animation, including Final Space. To learn more, check them out on Instagram at cartooncrave_ and at the Cartoon Crave on Twitter. Now, let's get into the episode. Well, it is time for the weekend on this beautiful Friday and the second to last episode of Into Final Thoughts. It's insane. We're almost here at the end, but thank you for tuning in. I'm Gabe Jones, and with me...
Oh, coming to you live in LA and Atlanta. Olan and Gabe for Into Final Thoughts.
We'll just do beat poetry corner and just...
One guy screaming.
You don't know the etiquette here. But we're here to break down episode 12 of Final Space Season 3, The Leaving. Very fitting title for such a heart-wrenching episode. Make sure you check out Tuesday's episode from our special premieres this week, where we talked over episode 11 after our drought of Into Final Thoughts. I know you guys have missed us. And make sure you tune in to our live stream of the final episode of Into Final Thoughts tomorrow at Final Space's old Saturday premiere time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern. We will definitely be on YouTube and maybe some other spots too, so make sure you're following it Into Final Space for all the up-to-date info. But folks, we'll be getting into episode 12 and trying to keep with that episode and try not to spoil anyone who might be, alternating between the show and the podcast. We might slip into some stuff. I know we did the last episode, but forgive us. But let's get into it. This episode has the highest of high notes and the lowest of dark valleys. This one was really crazy. Let's start off with some good. So after the kind of rifts that were in last episode, we get some really great teamwork, moments to fix the transdimensional bridge. What was it like to give us these like really nice moments of camaraderie right before it gets a little darker in this episode?
Yeah, I think that's, it was important. It was important for this kind of episode to kind of really kind of have like a few happy moments, like this episode's kind of, or this season in general is just very, very intense, very emotionally sad. And, it was a nice reprieve to get these kind of like little tiny moments beforehand. And it was good. I really like this episode. And I think that, there's a few things that, I would have done differently, or there are a few things that were actually done differently, but we had to kind of course correct it into, going in this kind of direction. But I think it works for what it is,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we get some really fun stuff in this episode. I think everybody loved the callback to Gary's season 1 fixing the satellites, and we've talked about a lot this season. The podcast is, making sure the show really has that connective tissue. But this one felt very, very tight. I know we talked a little bit about this in our last lingering thoughts with June on the last episode, changing out from the Kevin net to the transdimensional bridge. But what was it like coming to the decision to connect these moments as Gary was made for this?
Yeah, that was actually kind of a David thing. He really liked this idea of calling back to that moment, and I was down with it. It felt like a kind of a cool callback. I just wanted it to be a little bit more important. It felt like it wasn't that important with the hyper transdimensional bridge, But with the Kevin net, it made more sense to me because it was something that was a weapon. It could destroy potentially this threat that's looming against the universe.
Yeah.
And that felt like, oh man, that's that kind of cool thing that he was, fiddling around with on those satellites. And those satellites were, kind of like the activation point for it, And it made it made sense, for the most part. It just felt like the hypertransdimensional bridge, like, okay, I guess it's a thing that ends up saving him to a degree, that he just kind of goes home. But yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things that, you hope that it plays for the most part. And it was kind of cool, kind of trying to look back at the satellites of season 1 and trying to connect that with here. And it was cool,
Yeah, I think one of my favorite bots that has popped up from the Final Space fandom on Twitter is it still Thursday, Hugh? That goes up every Thursday with that scene from season 1. But yeah, and then we had some really great other fun moments in this episode. We had Gary and Quinn, creating the most liked Final Space clip on Adult Swim's YouTube. Ash making up with Quinn some, and little Kato bonding some with Cheryl, his adopted grandmother. What do you think of these scenes right here at the start of the episode?
Yeah, this was something that this was kind of like a scene that I wrote that I really liked, and what I was trying to do in this particular scene was spotlight and kind of foreshadow little Kato kind of basically addressing the whole, time shard.
Yeah.
Because that was supposed to happen in 313.
Yeah, I was gonna say you tagged me on Twitter that we were supposed to talk about this on this episode of the podcast. The cut for time, other side trauma scene. So yeah, feel free to dive into that as well.
And this is all happens like in the 313 of it all, because it felt like what I wanted to do was kind of like foreshadow it a little bit, that this is something that it's still a very painful experience that he just doesn't want to talk about.
Yeah.
He's just moved past it. And that's something that I can totally relate to, sometimes you just don't want to open up that, and you just want to keep moving forward. And in that process, you don't really address all of the things that have happened. You're just kind of moving past it, and the wound isn't healing. It's still an open wound. And I really love that, that dialogue that I kind of was just kind of writing, and it was kind of goofy, but at the same time, Steven did it with such earnesty. It was just a very earnest way that he read the line that, it came off a little emotional too, where it's like just a pain spot, Yeah. And that's kind of what it is. That's what it felt like to me, whenever you have something that's really painful, it's just a little spot of pain. That's kind of how I would describe it. And some people want to talk about it. Other people aren't ready to talk about it. And I don't think little Kato was ready. And I think, it was also kind of nice to kind of correct a little era in season 2 where, the whole age thing, so we kind of came up with a joke of like why he still says 14 because for sake of birthdays, so it's like, it was nice to do that. It was nice to kind of like foreshadow it. And you really got a little glimpse that it was still a very big open wound for him. So yeah, that's pretty much it, for 312, as far as like what I was going to do with that. That scene didn't really change. It was just 313. There was a sequence, it just kind of got ripped out. But it's fine.
We'll definitely cover that one because I think we're holding out for the international audience to get a certain radio play coming up here at some point. But yeah, so we also get to a little bit of little Kato learning about Apricot from Avocado. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us any more about this character? Is this just still hush hush for now?
Yeah, I think what you got was, I think it felt like it was the truth from Avocado, and a lot of the times I feel like kind of how I wrote it. This is kind of how I wrote it, was just the feeling that he was talking about what he was going through with his kid, and not necessarily little Kato's mother, but it still came off as a lie,
Sure.
So it's like, it's definitely one of those things that you could look at it at every which way, and I think, that's how I kind of mentally in my head, at least, kind of thought about it, where he was kind of telling something that was true, but at the same time lying.
Yeah.
And I could see how somebody could also look at it as like, no, he's just kind of straight up lying. He killed, his mom, like he straight up killed it, and he's just coming out with a big friggin' lie. But the way that Coty did it, and this is why it makes me, when I was thinking about it, the way that Coty read it, it felt like it was very honest, So it kind of, started to make me think like maybe he was kind of telling the truth about something, So I don't know. I mean, it's one of those things that sometimes the actors just put their own version of it in there. And same with Little Kato talking about the pain spot. That was supposed to be kind of more of a joke, but he did it with such like, the earnesty of that. And he came off very kind of emotional. Like you felt like there was something else there. And I was like, man, that's perfect. Like it's sometimes the actor just like can take something and just elevate it. And when Coty says that line, it really feels like, and even the acting that, Jamfield did to it, it feels like it's honest. It feels like it's something that he's talking about that's real, but at the same time, he's straight up lying to Little Kato again. So however that is, however you want to interpret it, feel free.
Yeah, and that was kind of the end to the good of this episode, as we kind of had it all fall apart after the bridge failing. And we went through this whole episode of 11 kind of punches thrown at him, and then we finally have what looks like maybe a success here, finding the bridge, and then everything falls apart. I want to start with Avocado finally deciding that this is the moment he needs to reveal the truth to Little Kato, as they're about to die. It's come down to the wire. So what does this tell us about Avocado as a character?
Yeah, I think that his there's a lot of people, that always kind of say like, I wish I would have said that before that person died.
Yeah.
I hear that all the time, man. Like you get that sense of regret. And I think that what you're feeling is Avocado doesn't want that regret. He doesn't want that guilt. He wants to kind of come clean. And sometimes that's like the best thing that you can do to kind of start the healing process. And I think that if Little Kato has a little bit of an open wound, I mean, Avocado has a massive one, and it's not kind of healing, and he's moved past it, and he hasn't addressed it, and he's kind of dealing with that kind of guilt in a way that he's like, look, if we're gonna die, I have to, he just has to.
Yeah.
Like there was no other explanation for it than he's just got to do it, because if this is it, he can't die knowing that he never told Little Kato. And I think that's like, you got to feel that amount of guilt. I don't know if anybody's ever felt that before. But sometimes you just want to say it, dude. You just want to actually speak the words, and it's, then you're just free of it. And I think what he's wanting to kind of make an amends. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And Coty's performance there, just his delivery of those lines, I think really kind of put that forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we get kind of, the idea of just how much of a broken family they are. We have Ash trying to take Little Kato here at the end of the episode. Can you kind of, I mean, we're coming right here to the end of the season, and one of the other things we talked about is the whole. I think three of the main topics we talked about, and we'll hit these again on 13 because I really want to kind of bring them to a wrap. But one of them I want to talk about here specifically is the family dynamic of this found family. Where are we right here at the end of season 3? How's our family fitting together or not fitting together?
Yeah, I think you're starting to see kind of the cracks in it, and I think that it was always something that was like a long time coming. Like they are pretty much a found family, but I think that this was kind of the whole Invictus plan from the beginning of just kind of breaking apart from the inside out. And if you can put doubt into somebody's head, actually like implant that's like one of the most powerful things that you can like inception into somebody's brain, because the moment they start doubting something, it doesn't really go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you believe something is right and you believe it with all your heart and you believe that you're kind of, the hero of your own story and kind of stuff like that. But the moment doubt enters your head, that's like, it throws everything off balance. Like you don't, like, doubt is very powerful, you can, if you plant a little bit of doubt into somebody, it could literally make them shut down. Like if you go to like let's say just the gym for an example, just like a terrible example, just like awful. If you have somebody there saying, you can do this, get up there and do, I don't know, 10 reps of a bicep curl or a chest press, whatever it is. And they are constantly saying, you got this, man, you got this, do it. They will do it. I promise you. But if you have somebody who says, man, I'm not sure you can do that, like, yeah, man, you're not going to do this. Right. Or it's like, maybe you should just give up, like once you start getting that, like those tiny little, inceptions of doubt, it kind of really starts to mess with your head. And I think that's kind of what you're starting to see with Ash, is that she is starting to get that doubt.
Yeah.
And it was an inception by Invictus. And I think that's a really powerful thing, whether or not you want to believe that's, corruption or coercion or whatever it is, it's powerful, and I think that power of influence, anybody can have. Sure. And I think that you're starting to see a little bit of doubt in everybody, it's starting to kind of emerge. It's like, maybe we're not going to succeed here. Maybe we're not going to win, and I think that's, a powerful feeling to kind of, address. And I think you're seeing it with Ash, and when she takes little Kato, I think she believes in her heart that what she is doing is the right thing, that she needs to get little Kato away from these people.
Yeah.
Because they are evil, and she believes that in her heart to be the right thing. And I think that with Avocado, Gary, and all of them, I think you're having basically having to address someone who no longer believes in you, know, and that's a really hard thing to kind of convince somebody. When somebody does not believe in you anymore, that you are right, that everything that you say is a lie and everything that you are trying to do is wrong. Good luck. I've seen that, I see that in real life, like if there's ever been a time where you've had a friend that basically has kind of like turned their back on you and started to kind of, talk crap, and they just don't believe in you anymore. Like that's a really hard thing to convince them, Yeah. And that's what I think you're kind of seeing in this moment, is in this kind of, if you were to encapsulate the feeling, it's like this person no longer believes that these people are right. Little Kato is just in a complete state of confusion. His world is teetering on this thing that is about to just collapse in its own personal, being. Like he doesn't know what he's still processing it. You know what I mean? He didn't even get a chance to kind of really let it soak in for a second. Like you know what I mean? And that's like a really vulnerable spot for somebody to be in. And I think he really wants to kind of figure out what is going on. But the whole thing is just kind of like the dominoes are crashing down, and I think that's the feeling that we wanted to have come out in this particular scene, is just to feel like, oh my God, what is happening? Like what is going on? And yeah, I think I think we did that,
Yeah. Yeah. Ending on probably the most heartbreaking performance I think Steven Yeun's given is I don't want to go Ash.
No. I got the most.
I'm sorry. I
have it lingering, man.
The secret drive just hidden away.
The people got to hear that performance alone. Yeah. It's heartbreaking, dude. He's Academy Award winning actor, or nominee. Like he should. He's a powerhouse of an actor, and he brought it in this, like the first kind of go through of 313, and he did it in even the current version. But there were some lines in this original version of 313 that you're just like, oh my God, if we would have gotten that animated, if it would have gotten out of the kind of the animatic phase and actually been animated, you would have saw some performances that you just don't see, man. You just don't see it.
Yeah.
And it's powerful.
Yeah. I think 12 is a good show of, what Final Space does best. It's 21 minutes. It's just short, sweet, and to the point with just these really just hits, these emotional hits. I'd say this episode probably left me closest to crying apart from 13. And it comes down to, beautiful artwork on the side of both Shadow Machine and Jamfield, and you guys. The cast of the show does just an exceptional job in what they do, every single one of you. So yeah, kudos to Stephen Young, because wow, and to all of you. I just gotta say, you guys do an exceptional job.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, man. And yeah, so we get to discuss that super emotional episode tomorrow, which is super exciting. 13, listen in at 10:30 p.m. Eastern, definitely on YouTube, where we hit the season finale of Final Space. It's going to be very, very good. Just like the Lingering Thoughts, which comes right on after this episode, after these last few bits of info for you. Make sure you're following at Final Space and at Into Final Space, as well as Gabriel W. Jones and at Olan Rogers on Instagram and Twitter. Like, subscribe, and comment on this YouTube video if that's where you're listening at the moment. If not, make sure you're following the show wherever you podcast, and throw us 5 stars on Apple. It helps a lot. And that's it for this one. Into Final Lingering Thoughts is coming to you right now. So for Olan Rogers and myself, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Into Final Space. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for holding on and tuning in to our second Into Final Lingering Thoughts. We have fans enter online and randomly selected 3 to join us on these last few episodes of Into Final Thoughts to ask any lingering questions to the man himself, Olan Rogers. I'd like to welcome today's fan, Brooke. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you love Final Space.
Oh, we're doing this now?
Yeah.
Oh.
Throwing you right to the deep
end. I thought
end.
you guys were gonna
talk. No, it's all you. Tell us why you like Final Space.
Oh, okay. Alrighty then. Hey there, Gabe, Olan, and all you fan Treksians out there listening. My name's Brooke, and I'm personally a huge fan of television animation. The first time I watched Final Space was during the hiatus of seasons 1 and 2. As an animation fan, the first thing I look for in any show is its flair, being how original a program is compared to others. And my goodness, Final Space wouldn't be a show I hold so close to my heart if it wasn't for its drastic flair. Most fans think of Final Space's drastic flair as the show's emotional moments, and although that's a really big part of it, what really got me personally interested in the show was its comedy. When most adult animation at the time used crude and innuendo-based comedy for laughs, Final Space delivers a comedy I can't exactly pinpoint because it's so far out there in the best way. Some moments, such as Gary dancing in the hallway when Quinn doesn't recognize him, the ongoing pigeon joke, the sex stuff line from Conan O'Brien, and literally everything that comes out of Tribor's mouth. These are the jokes no other show could manage to make funny because Final Space delivers everything using a specific flair. I see Final Space as a show that's trying to make a difference within the industry, and when you put a whole lot of heart into making a positive difference in people's lives, then you have my utmost respect.
Dang, that was far more well-spoken than Nam and I on the show. But yeah, that was great. Brooke,
Babe, you're out of the job. Get out of here.
I'll go ahead and log off. But yeah, Brooke, we're super excited to have you on Lingering Thoughts. It's going to be a lot of fun. And you got 3 questions to hit. Go ahead, throw your first one at Olan Rogers.
Yes, I got 3 questions. I try to go from least complex to most complex.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 1. You said on social media that the Little Kato royalty arc wasn't planned until the writing process of season 2. That being said, at this point in the show's run, which arcs were planned since the beginning of the show and which arcs were planned while during the writing process?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's in the writing process, everything is evolving at a season by season basis. You can plan some ahead, and there's some that will actually change, but it's a very much evolving process. There's some things, as far as, there's one thing that I've always only wanted one mooncake, and that's been since the beginning. One mooncake is special. I've always wanted that. That'll never change. Kind of the I think the big thing about season 1 is it played so much like a movie that it felt very definite. It felt like you got everything encapsulated in that season 1. Once you got into season 2, there needed to be more story. So you had to kind of think even, further into these characters. And this is kind of how most TV shows even do it. They don't really have the ability to think so far ahead. A, because you don't know if it's going to get picked up. B, your writers are only hired for that first season. And it gets really awkward with guild stuff and all that stuff if you're starting to brainstorm other ideas for other seasons. So you're kind of, forced to kind of think of these ideas and write them down. And, they might change, they might not change. The avocado thing, I always kind of wanted to really dive into his guilt and his kind of war crimes since season 1. That's actually been a season 1 thing. And you kind of see a little bit of it in episode 6 when Avocado starts to tell Gary and you see him destroying all these ships. Like, it's something that it was always an interesting story point. But the little Kato thing, that was kind of a very kind of later in the show's run. I think another thing that was kind of that I've been fighting against, with this is me and David always see different, on not really eye to eye on this particular thing, but Quinn kind of becoming Nightfall. I like the idea of Quinn being her kind of own person and, being just Quinn, like I always like that, I like that they're two separate characters and they really are two separate characters. And David really likes the idea of, Quinn becoming Nightfall. So it's like, it's one of those things that, it's always a compromise in the story process, but it's always evolving. So hope that answered it.
All right. Wait, did you say that writers are only brought in for a season of a show?
Yes.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So basically, like when you hire a writer, you'll meet up with them, you'll talk to them, you'll see if they really jive with, what you're wanting to do and the stories that you're wanting to tell. And a lot of the times they have experience, so, some of them don't even have experience, they come in and they've written one script or they've done comic books or whatever it is, but you only really hire the writers for, for our budget, we only had the writers for 2 to 3 months. And that's not a lot of time. Typically, that you can't write all the scripts in that amount of time. So David and I are writing probably more, since we're for the whole production, we're writing from, beginning to literally the very end of the show. So almost like a whole year, we're constantly tweaking, writing, punching up. It's like, we're always on it, but the writers, they're not on for the whole production and they only have that job for 2 to 3 months and then they go off to the next job. And so you might get some of them back for the next season, but a lot of the times they're off on the next thing or they sold a show or, so it's always hard to get those writers back sometimes, but sometimes you can.
Yeah.
That's incredibly interesting.
And, yeah. And Brooke, your second question.
Question number 2. To me, the use of technology is an important factor in establishing the setting of a movie or a show. Throughout the series so far, the only sources of technology we've seen are weapons or vehicles, making it difficult to establish the time period of the show. So I have to know, when does Final Space take place?
Yeah, we don't ever have like a definitive year, of when it takes place. We just know it happens in the very, very far future. It's the same thing like Star Wars. You don't really know exactly the exact date, when you're watching those things. And, something that I always really liked in the show is I always told like Devo, the art director, I said, if you can buy it in Target, you don't need to put it in the show, you know? And there's a lot of the times, and I always bump on stuff like this, and it was kind of a rule that just kind of stuck. But I love Futurama, but I always hated how like it was in the future, but there were still things like today that were like in there. And it's like, I just like, you know, when you're immersed into a world like Star Wars, or even, you know, a lot of sci-fi stuff like Star Trek and stuff like that. They kind of make their own version of that. You know what I mean? So it's something that I tried to make sure that the art people came in, and it went down to the most basic thing as a cup to all the way to, you know, a chair. You know what I mean? And it's like it could not look like it was from Target. And so they would design something that made it feel like very futuristic. So that kind of aids into the idea of like, you know, when was it? Because it's like, it's not in the near future. It's definitely in the future, you know? So I don't really have an exact date, but that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I had a feeling it took place in the distant future. I was very curious about when exactly, though. So that's very good to know.
Yeah, and Brooke, your final question.
My final question. Going back to Season 2, Episode 7's The First Times They've Met, Nightfall shares the story on how she met her Gary. Nightfall's backstory reveals a Gary with an occupation almost opposite to the one we know, as her Gary's part of the Infinity Guard. Nightfall and her Gary first meet on the sidewalk, sharing a small talk with Nightfall, then inviting Gary to get a drink with her. This action immediately erases everything from our Gary's timeline. Because Nightfall and Gary went to the bar together, Nightfall/Quinn had no intention to scribble on the napkin that gave the Infinity Guard the answer to opening Final Space, being the whole purpose as to why our Quinn and Gary teamed up in the first place, eventually leading to Quinn's departure into Final Space. Plus, because Gary went with Nightfall into the bar, he didn't feel the need to impress her, undoing his act of blowing up 92 Imperium cruiser ships in a small family-owned restaurant, meaning Nightfall's Gary wouldn't have had his imprisonment, or neither met Mooncake and Avocado, aka the two things making him a target of the Lord Commander. With Nightfall's backstory erasing everything about our universe that led to the journey from closing the bridge to now, how does Nightfall's story add up to her goals throughout the series?
Yeah, what a question. You know, I think it's anytime that you're dealing with time travel, there's always kind of like the rules that are set in place back to the future days, to Minority Report and all these different things. You know, like there's always kind of like everybody's iteration of what they think time travel is, and they try to make it as foolproof as possible, and nobody can ever get it foolproof, you know. But the one thing I'll say is that, you know, from what it sounds like you're saying, is that because of Nightfall's Gary, he didn't experience the same things as our Gary. So in that process, he didn't meet Mooncake, Avocado, and it didn't start the whole events that started place in the present day show version of how things escalated. Yeah. And the thing that we kind of always, you know, had fun with is that, you know, if you remember back in Bolo's mind, there's so many different iterations of Gary. There's Cookie Head Gary. There's the Eel Head Gary. There's tons of different iterations. So there's also the multiverse side of it, and there's also the time travel side of it. So what Nightfall is actually doing is she's going back in time, trying to correct a mistake that's been made in, you know, basically this timeline. And what we're trying to say, and this is how I always saw it, is that the events that took place, there's certain events that always happen, no matter what, it's just destiny. And however they happen, Mooncake is always meant to find Gary. Avocado is always meant to find, you know, Mooncake and Gary. The events are always meant to happen a certain way. And that's kind of what you get a little bit at the end of, you know, this season when, you know, Quinn kind of becomes Nightfall, is that we're kind of saying, hey, you know, all these events are kind of, there's destiny involved, you know, and what you have is you have certain things, certain touch points that will always happen. So in Nightfall's storyline, when she meets Gary, who is in part of the Infinity Guard, somewhere in their storyline, he found Mooncake. and thus sent Avocado, and thus the Lord Commander, and thus everything kind of goes about the same kind of way, except he goes into the breach. And so you have this thing where Nightfall and now is like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to correct this. And every time she corrects it, something changes in that timeline, but the same events keep occurring. Gary meets Mooncake, and thus when he meets Mooncake, he tries to, drop Mooncake off at, Yarno, which thus, Nightfall's trying. There's all these things that are like happening relatively the same way. That's essentially what we're trying to say in this thing, is that she's trying to correct it. And each time she corrects it, there's still certain things that are happening and the outcome is the same, but the events in the middle vary, essentially, if that helps.
Yeah. Would you really say maybe that Mooncake met Gary different ways throughout all the time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like that's just the one time that Mooncake met him in that version in the present day when he was out, sitting on the satellite. But yeah, absolutely. He would meet Gary in multiple different ways, but that's the destiny kind of, nexus point, is that they will always meet no matter what. That's just a part of that timeline, and what Nightfall's trying to correct is that she's trying to figure out why is the outcome basically equaling the same thing, which is Gary kind of dying and going off into final space. So she's trying to figure out what is that point. And then finally, and we see that in season 1, she's like, it's Mooncake. Like, I just got to kill Mooncake. Like she's trying to figure out what it is. And for whatever reason, she's hasn't been able to find it. And this is like the last time where she's like, you know what? We're just going to see what happens, and I think when Gary stays, it shows her, it's like, you know what, this is probably it. This is probably the last time around, but yeah, exactly. Mooncake meets Gary in tons of different ways,
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us with those great questions, Brooke, and thank you for being a fan of the podcast and the show, and for coming on to Into Final Lingering Thoughts. And thank you for tuning in after this episode to listen in. We'll see you next time, Fanchexians.
Awesome.